Lorena Rodriguez Banda is a proud daughter of two hardworking Mexican immigrants and first-generation graduate receiving her bachelor's in social work from Texas State University. She is the founder of the PFILES newsletter, which aims to break sexual pleasure and health stigmas and taboos within BIPOC communities. Lorena's newsletter also works toward redefining what it looks like to be a woman of color running for office or working in politics by discussing taboo subjects society has ignored. Lorena is also known for her experience in electoral campaign strategy, training, and facilitating. Welcome, Lorena. I'm so excited to be able to speak with you today. Just from what I've learned and read a little bit about your background, I know that this is going to be an incredible conversation. I really do believe that folks are going to learn a lot. And so for the folks who haven't had a chance to connect with you or learn much about you, can you share a little bit with our listeners about who you are, what you do, why you do what you do? Let's start there.
Yes. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's so great to be here. I'm super excited as well. My name is Lorena Rodriguez Banda. I'm the founder of the PFILES newsletter, which is a sex positive newsletter. I'm also a campaign strategist, trainer, and facilitator. I've been able to work in Miami, New York City, Texas, DC. So I've been all over the US, but now I'm back in Texas. And I'm also originally from Texas, San Antonio specifically. I'm a daughter of immigrants, first generation. And yeah, that's sex positive as fuck over here.
I know that's right. With you working in politics and working on campaigns, I'm sure these last few months have been very, very busy and stressful for you. Congratulations on surviving election season. I have a friend who works, who's an organizer as well, and I know she could not wait for November 5th to come and go.
Yes, it was hectic. I was checking in my organizer friends too. I'm like, take care of yourself.
Yes.
Crazy out here.
It was a time. It was a time, especially for y'all who are more involved than folks like me who are just following the news and going to vote. So I want to talk a little bit about, before we get into more about the work that you do, which is incredible, by the way, and I do want to make sure we have plenty of time for that, but just kind of some of your background and why this work is so important to you. From how the way I understand it is that it is a professional passion that started as a personal passion. Can you share a little bit about how your upbringing, how your childhood, your personal experiences shaped your understanding of sexual health and pleasure?
Yeah, so that's a great question first. And for me, growing up in a very, very strict Mexican household, in an immigrant household, sex was just not talked about. Conversations around those taboos and stigmas just it wasn't talked about at all. We couldn't even say the word sex because it's like it's a bad thing to do. We shouldn't be talking about it, and that's that. So I kind of already knew I shouldn't be having sex because it's a bad thing. And also with the conversation around masturbation, I feel like with that, especially Latinas, we're not taught to experience pleasure on our own because that's a nasty thing to do, and women don't do that. For me, honestly, growing up, I thought only men can do that, like touch themselves. I didn't know I was allowed to do that myself. And then for me, whenever I moved to New York City, I got a little bit more involved in the sexuality industry. I came across the podcast Future of Sex by Brian and Cole, and I got hooked. I got super hooked. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And then another moment that I knew I wanted to be in this industry was whenever I went to a sex toy store in Brooklyn, and a group of Latinas walked in, and this one girl was trying to figure out what sex toy to buy, and she was deciding between the Rose and some other one. And I stepped in because her friends were like, "Oh, girl, like I don't know what to do." And I stepped in, I was like, "Girl, get this one. Like this one's gonna be your best friend." And from that moment, I was like, you know what? I could do a living off of this. I enjoy this. So that's how I got started.
It's always so interesting to me that we can grow up in these households or in these families where we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about pleasure, we're not talking about any of these things. And I'm sure they never imagined that they are raising children who are going to make sex and sexuality their career, who are going to make a living off of talking about sex and pleasure every day. I have a similar story of like, we just didn't really talk about it. It just wasn't a thing. It wasn't a topic. And then I'm like telling my mom, yeah, I'm going to be a sex therapist. And she's just like, okay, I guess. Like, so interesting to me how folks can go from nope, hush hush, we don't talk about this, to now this is how I pay my bills, this is how I make a living.
Yeah, you're more brave than me because my parents don't even know what I do. Like my mom
Oh,
doesn't know that I work in
really?
politics. And that's honestly like a conversation I just don't want to have with her. Like my mom is who she is. She's
Right.
older. There's that generational barrier, that language barrier. So
Mhm.
I'm just like, she's not gonna know what I'm doing. So
Yeah. Long as she knows you got a job and a roof over your head, she'll be happy.
exactly.
She'll be satisfied. For these things that you were saying, like, we don't talk about sex. It's a dirty word. It's a dirty, nasty thing we shouldn't be doing. We're not masturbating. Only men do that. Were these things that were like directly or explicitly said to you, or is it things you learned more indirectly?
That's a great question. I think both. There was this one moment I remember, like I had my like I know this is like whatever rated R, but I remember growing up and I think I would like sleep with my hand in my like pants or something, or like
Mm-hmm.
my underwear, and my
Mm-hmm.
mom would like slap my hand. She was like, "No, you don't touch yourself right there." And
Mm.
I was like, okay, like I didn't really understand it like growing up. And then I remember her having a conversation with my sister, like, oh, why does she do that? Like, I thought only boys do that. And from that moment, it caught on. I was like, okay, like, I guess only boys and men are supposed to touch their private area, or they're only allowed.
Oh, yeah.
So
Hmm.
that was for me. And then also growing up with three older sisters, so I'm the baby of the family.
Mm.
Observing them and all the shit that they were doing, I was like, okay, not don't do that, don't do that, don't talk about that.
Mm.
So with my mom, again, she never really sat me down to talk about sex or anything like that. It was just what I was observing around me, and I don't blame her because, like, again, it's that language barrier, that generational barrier, and
Yeah.
also my mom was like working all the time. She had two jobs.
Mm.
She cleaned houses. She also worked at McDonald's. So it was a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and she's doing the best she can. Like, we can have grace and understanding for our parents a lot of times as we get older. Of like, they were doing the best they could with what they had. No one was having these conversations with them either. Thinking about those generational differences, or those generational divides. Do your sisters know what you do for work? Do they know more of the details than your
Yeah,
than your
a
parents do?
little, yeah, a little bit because they
Okay.
follow me on TikTok and like Instagram, and
Mm-hmm.
then they also follow me on YouTube. So they're like watching me. And
Oh,
my older sister also comes to me sometimes. She's like, "Which sex toy should I buy?" Or like, "Can you buy it for me?" Because my Amazon's linked to my mom's account, and I don't want her to see what I'm doing.
yeah.
So
Yeah, isn't that something to be the youngest, but also be such a pioneer and such a trailblazer in the world of sexual health and pleasure, that they know I can go to my little sister and ask her these questions, and we can have a conversation about it, and it's going to be judgment free, and I can get some good, solid answers and information.
yes, exactly. And I think
Yeah.
that's all about like, people always talk about like the little sister or the eldest is what's it called? Like the
The
eldest.
eldest daughter syndrome. Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have a little bit of it, even though I'm the youngest.
It's so funny. We had a couple episodes back about eldest daughter syndrome, and the psychologist that I was talking with said that sometimes those traits can show up in younger siblings, that some of those traits are learned, and so they can definitely show up in folks who are not the oldest. So that's so interesting. Do you notice any shifts in your family, like amongst the different generations? Like, are there, if there are folks like your age or in between that generation, of you and your parents who maybe have kids, or are they having different conversations, or have some of those, norms kind of continued?
Yeah, so my second oldest sister, I see her that she's a little bit more open with my nephew
Mm.
about like his private parts and
Hmm.
like sexual pleasure and sexual health, which makes me happy because again, like it just wasn't talked about in our household. And like
Yeah.
kids are going to be curious, especially teenagers. And with social media, I feel like a lot of times people like are so hesitant about young kids about watching like porn and stuff, but they also have access to that on Instagram, TikTok. Like it's
Yeah.
just not porn sites. It's like also on the socials that they're on daily.
Yeah. Yeah. Not they don't even have to be looking for it. Like it can find them. And so why not have the conversation so they know what to do if they do unintentionally run into something, or if they are curious and they're doing some searching, like let's have some conversation. What to look for, how to keep yourself safe, all that sort of thing. Of course,
Mhm.
easier said than done, when we're talking about generations of this is the way it's always been, and now we're trying to do something new.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I hear my nephew talk sometimes. I'm like, oh my god, no, like don't do that. But then I'm like, okay, he's getting older. Like my boyfriend also
Yeah.
reminds me, like he's getting older, babe. Like you can't change that. I'm like, I know, but that's my baby.
Yeah. Doesn't make it any easier. Doesn't
Yeah.
make it any easier. You were talking about like when you were in Brooklyn and you went into the sex toy store and you started listening to this podcast. What was that moment that shifted for you of I'm even going to seek this information out about pleasure, about sex? Like I'm going to teach myself things that I haven't been taught yet. How do we get from we don't talk about this at all to I'm seeking these things out for myself?
Yeah, I think going to college and being able to be on my own
Mhm.
and exploring myself in that sense, and
Mhm.
also engaging in sexual activity and figuring out what like pleasure feels like and looks like for me. And I
Yeah.
feel like it just got better as I got older, um,
Mm,
because I knew what I liked, especially going into New York City. People are more open over there, especially men, when it comes to like sex toys and all that. So
mhm.
I was able to explore different sides of me because I've had all these different perspectives in my life.
Yeah, okay. And so being able to kind of blend those influences and you get to
Hmm.
decide and determine what does pleasure look like, feel like, mean for me.
Exactly. Yes.
I love that. I love that. I love that. How does it feel for you, or what does it mean for you to be a part of the first generation in many ways? Again, that pioneer, that trailblazer of breaking the stigma of talking about sex, talking about pleasure. Like, whoo, how does that feel for you?
Yeah, it feels good. It's a lot,
Hmm.
and I feel like honestly, like the way I experience pleasure and how I see pleasure changes as I get older.
Mm-hmm.
How what pleasure looked like to me in my 18, 19, 20, early 20s doesn't look like at this age now at 27.
Hmm.
Um, and just knowing that if I do decide to have kids and me and my boyfriend go that route,
Hmm.
that my kids are going to have a parent that has these experiences, and maybe I can help them make more informed decisions when it
Mm.
comes to their own sexuality and sexual
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah, and it's not easy to be the first or to be the trailblazer in that way. And it makes it so much easier for everyone that comes after you, for your nephew, for kids if you have kids, like for even just, kids or teenagers who know you or who are connected to you. I'm thinking about folks who might accidentally stumble upon the P files and like what does that mean for them that they can get this information so easily and not have to hide it or struggle to find some of these things. Like I just think it's incredible.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times, especially like the older generation, like they're like, "Oh, I went through this shit. You got to go through this too."
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? That doesn't even make sense. Like to me, like everything that I'm doing, it's because I want the generations after me to have better access than me, and they don't have to make the same mistakes or go through the same encounters that I did. And it doesn't have to be my own kids. It's like what you said, like people just running into the P files, and we're like, oh shit, like we can actually talk about this out loud, and
Yeah.
people are experiencing the same thing as me. Like there's community.
Yes, because
Mhm.
community makes a huge difference. Just knowing you're not the only person with these struggles, these questions, these feelings, and that there could be answers out there for you. There are other people out there who want to help you, who want to support you. So incredible. What advice or recommendations might you give to someone who finds himself in a similar situation culturally? They're like, oh my gosh, Lorena's childhood and family sounds so much like mine. Like, we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about pleasure. I have all these questions. I want to break these cycles. What would you say?
Be unapologetically yourself always.
Mm.
And if your family doesn't fuck with that, or anybody else around you doesn't fuck with that, then that's not your people. I feel like a
Mm.
lot of time, especially as Latinos, as the Latinx community, we're taught that family is family. We stick by family no matter
Mhm.
what. Even
Mhm.
if they hurt you, you got to stick by them.
Yeah.
But to me, that doesn't mean anything. Like, family doesn't have to be blood. I have a lot of friends that aren't blood, but I consider them family, and
Yeah.
they're more for me than my actual family.
Mm.
Um, Again, so being unapologetically yourself, I can't say that word.
Mhm.
Setting those boundaries and also getting out of your comfort zone. I knew from a very young age that if I wanted to have a different perspective and be successful in this world, I needed to get out of my hometown, especially my own household. I feel
Mm.
like a lot of times the Latinx culture, we're taught that we need to stay home and we need to take care of our family.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself first. So
Yeah.
that's
Mm. Yeah, and I appreciate you just giving someone who may be listening, maybe, yeah, just maybe the permission that they need to say, no, maybe I am going to be a little selfish and prioritize what I want or what I need, and just thinking about how you're able to even love your family or love your loved ones better when you can do that from an authentic place, when you can do that from a place of having your own needs met and feeling valued and respected, and like you were saying, there is a difference between family and relatives.
mm-hmm.
Your family may include people that are not your relatives, that you're not related to, and all of your relatives may not be who you consider your family.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's like, again, it's just having that perspective. Like, whenever I left to college and even New York,
Mm-hmm.
I knew my family was going to be there, but I knew I would have resentment or like anger towards my
Mm.
family if I would have stayed.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, if you don't even give yourself the chance, or if you just stay stuck in this mold, stuck in these constraints that don't work for you, don't feel good for you, but you're trying to force it, you're trying to make it work to please other people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, it is going to be hard to feel warm and fuzzy about them after a while.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit more about your work. So for you, which came first, the campaign work or founding the P Files?
Campaign work.
Okay.
I founded the PFILES last year.
Oh, gotcha.
But
Okay.
it's been a year, almost a year. Or yeah, it's been almost 2 years.
Oh.
So the campaign work started first.
Mm-hmm.
I did my very first campaign here in Texas in San Antonio, and then I moved to New York City in 2020, right when the pandemic started. It was crazy.
Whew.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That sounds like a time. Why campaign work? What drew you to that work? And has your focus always been on women in politics, or BIPOC women in politics?
No, so the original dream was to move to DC
Mm-hmm.
and work in at the Hill. I
Okay.
remember graduating college. So I've been involved in politics since college. I did an internship with my local city councilman my sophomore year. I was the first Latina president of NAACP at my school.
Mm.
So I've always been around that work. And I also did an internship at the Texas Capitol as well. I graduated college in 2019, and I could not find a job, like at all. Like, could not
Mm.
find a job. Everybody kept telling me you don't have enough experience and all this other stuff. So I did bottle service for a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I would visit the councilman that I worked for. I would visit like his workers because had a good relationship with everybody there.
Mm-hmm.
I told them like this is what I want to do, and they're like, okay, well, you need to start volunteering on campaigns because that's how you're gonna get on the Hill. Because if you don't know anybody, you're not gonna have access to the Hill.
You need those
Uh,
connections.
exactly. So
Mm.
I started volunteering on a campaign, and then a couple months later, I was promoted to their community organizer. And the rest is history from there. Honestly, like I just been doing this work since then.
Wow, and it sounds like it really just kind of took off for you, especially like being in such a major political city and like in major cities in general, when so much is going on in the world, we don't know what in the world was really going on with COVID, especially in the beginning. And you're making these huge like career life changing decisions, in a very like in a field or an industry that's known for being very volatile and very like up and down and stressful. And here you are like, I'm here. I'm in the thick of it. I'm loving it. I'm making a life out of this.
Yes, it's been a journey, and honestly, like I said in the beginning, like I knew from a very young age because of who I am and how I grew up, I needed to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order to be successful in this life.
Mm,
And graduating college and not having a job right after teaches you something fast. Like you need to network
yeah.
and go talk to folks, and that's not taught to first generation, especially people of color. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of figuring it out and talking to other folks about what you want to do.
Yeah, because you don't inherit the connections, the prestige, the all of those things that other folks do from more privileged groups do. Like, oh, our families have known each other for generations, and your dad went to school with his dad and used to date his aunt or whatever. It's like, no, we're starting from scratch. Like, you have to form these connections for the first time by yourself with no blueprint, no rule book, no one to really even like hold your hand through how to do that.
Yes, exactly. And I always talk about, especially working on electoral campaigns, like
Mm,
I didn't even know I could do this as a career. If it wasn't for me talking to the people at the city council person's office, I would have never known. And I always say,
mm,
like, opportunities like this are not presented to people of color, especially in college. Like,
yeah.
a lot of people don't know that they can become campaign managers, field directors, community organizers.
Yeah. So what is your recommendation maybe for college students or for folks getting ready to go off to college who are like, I can see myself doing what Lorena is doing or has done. I just don't know how to get my foot in the door. What would you say would be a helpful starting point? Because like we always do talk about, you got to network, you got to meet people. What kind of people do we need to meet? Where should we be trying to meet these people?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is research local offices within your area.
Mm,
So, who's your city council person? Who's your state rep? And see when their campaigning is going to start, like their campaign. Because
mhm,
what people don't know, campaigning is like right when they get into office, they have to start thinking about, like, oh shit, I got to start campaigning in like a couple months. But it's essentially,
for even for reelection.
yes, yes.
Okay.
So I would start researching who's in office already. And another great idea is to go to your local, it doesn't have to be, well, Democratic. I'm a Democrat, but
Mm-hmm.
go to your local Democrat chapters and get to know people, network. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I know in Miami, they had like a young Dade Miami Dems.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so joining those young chapters, because a lot of times, especially whenever I was in New York, I was a campaign manager for a city council person in Queens, and we would go to the local Dem club meetings, and it was a bunch of like older folks, and I'm like,
Mm,
what are the young people? Like, we need our voices heard and our ideas heard in these meetings because
yeah.
the future.
Yeah, and the talent, the skill sets that younger folks have is so important and is so necessary if we can get more plugged into these groups, into these organizations. I love that you said start locally, start with who's already in office, start with what's already happening and how can I get involved. It may mean you are the one who starts the young Dems group in your town or on your campus, if there's a need for that and it doesn't already exist. But finding out what does already exist and who can you connect with who's already doing the work. I love that.
And also just not being afraid of being the first one to start things, like you said, being the first one to start these chapters that within your community. Or even like whenever I did my first campaigns as a volunteer, I remember the field director calling me and be like, hey, I can't make it, can you lead this canvas? And I'm like, I've never done this before. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing, but we fake it till we make it, and we make shit
Yes.
happen. So that's all that
Yes. And now it's like, oh, this is a thing that I can do.
exactly.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So what motivated you or what inspired you? You're already doing this incredible work in the campaign realm. What made you say almost 2 years ago, more? I want to do more. I'm going to start the P Files. What was the inspiration?
People keep telling me no. Like, people kept telling me no, like, you don't have enough experience, you can't work
Mm,
in this area, or we're looking for this type of experience. And it's like, okay, but you're trying to organize with my community and you're
mm,
telling me I don't have experience. Um,
mm,
so I told myself, I said, fuck it. Like, I'm going to start my newsletter. I was really iffy about it because I knew I was going to talk about very taboo rated R subjects or
mm-hmm,
rated X, whatever you want to call it.
mm-hmm.
Um, but I was confident in myself that this is needed. And if people are not going to allow me to sit at the table, fuck the chair. I'm going to bring my own table and do
Yeah.
what I have to do.
Yeah, and again, not being afraid to start something from scratch and say it doesn't exist, it isn't here, and it's necessary, it's needed. So I
Mhm.
guess I'll do it. I guess I'll be the one to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it was very intimidating, like starting a newsletter, because I'm like,
Mm,
I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I don't even know how to structure it. But
yeah.
what helped me was like just looking at other newsletters, how they structured it,
Mhm.
and just going from there, honestly, and just getting advice from folks that are already like doing this type of work.
Yeah, and the thing is, because I felt I've wanted to start this podcast for years, and I was just dragging my feet about it for a lot of the same reasons. I don't know how to start a podcast. I don't know how to host a pod. Do I even have anything to say? What am I going to talk about? And just getting over the fear of starting and doing it and being willing to like figure it out, to make mistakes, to ask questions. And I'm sure that there are people who have been along this ride with you from day one, the very first issue, like the day one of the P Files, and can probably speak to like, oh, here's how things have grown or changed. And
Yeah.
we never get there if you don't start. We never get there if you don't have a day one.
Yes, like I don't know if you have this problem, but I'm such a like a perfectionist, and I'm like, no,
Yes.
it
Oh,
has to be perfect. And I feel like a
yes.
lot of times as like women of color, black and brown, like
Mm-hmm.
we're taught that we need all these certifications, we need all the degrees in order to just be qualified.
Yeah.
And it's like we're already qualified, like, you know?
Yeah, like you were saying, I how are you going to tell me you're trying to work with my community and you're telling me I don't have experience. I don't have enough experience. Like that lived experience is so valid and so valuable. There's some things that you can't get out of a textbook that you're not going to learn in a classroom that you only learn because this is your life, because this is your mom's life, your grandma's life, your aunt's life, whatever the case might be, and that is so important and so valuable. So
Mhm.
I'm glad. I'm not glad that people kept telling you no, but I am glad that you didn't let the no stop you and that you still created work that is so important and so necessary.
Yes, thank you. I think there's a
Yeah.
quote that I listened to too that just stuck with me. It's like, if someone tells you no, you're talking to the wrong person, and you keep talking to people until you get that yes.
Somebody's going to give you the yes. That's so true. And then I feel like a lot of times once you get the yes, all of the people who told you no are like, oh, I
Yeah.
could have been a part of that. I didn't know that P Files was going to be doing all of this, and that. I didn't know that she had all these gifts and talents, or I would have said yes years ago. And it's like, well, too late. You missed the bus.
Exactly. And the price went up. So,
Yeah, exactly. So subscribe and good luck next time. Make better decisions, I guess. So what's your goal or what's your mission, your hope for the P Files? What impact do you want the P Files to have? And who do you hope is most impacted?
I hope the most impacted are women of color,
Mm,
especially first gen,
mm,
um, and children of immigrants. Because again, like, those conversations are not being had in our household.
mhm,
Um, and my hope is just to create those conversations, that community, for us to just like figure out that what pleasure looks like and feels like for us, and also just taking away that shame around having sex or
mm,
masturbating or using
mhm.
sex toys. Because like sex is normal, like it's a human thing. Like, you don't have to just have sex in order to procreate. You can also do it for pleasure, for to
Yeah.
feel good and to relieve stress.
Yes, yes. The just like pleasure can be enough, and pleasure is important, and that we all deserve it. We all deserve access to it. And to I always say that I encourage people to make pleasure a daily practice, to do something every day that brings you joy, that brings you pleasure, sexual or not. Something like life is hard and it sucks most of the time. Can
Yeah,
we find a tiny moment of pleasure in every day?
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. I love that. So in your work and being as involved as you are with like sexual health and wellness and the pleasure work that you do specifically in communities of color, what have been some of the most common or kind of the biggest misconceptions or stigmas or taboos that you've kind of run into?
That's a great question. And most of the time, whenever I'm writing my newsletter, I'm talking about my perspective as a Latina.
Mhm.
Um, but I know talking to like my friends, um, there's just a lot of shame when it comes to like having sex.
Mm.
I know a lot of my friends grew up in the South, are Black women, and they're like, we there's just so much shame around it.
Mhm.
Another one is again like the sexual health aspect of things, like when people do get like chlamydia or gonorrhea or
Mhm.
herpes, whatever it may be. People are like, "Oh, you're dirty. You're a slut. That's why you're holding around or whatever."
Mhm.
It's like most of the time, like women go get checked, and it's always mostly the men that hold these um what's it called, like these STDs. I know what's one of them, bacterial vaginosis. Like
Mhm.
a lot of times
Mhm.
the hosts for that are men.
Thinking about like the shame that a lot of women hold that may not even be their shame to hold, like that this is not even necessarily about something that you've done, or like that this shame doesn't even really belong to you, that partly because of the misinformation about sexual health and STIs and how they're spread, and how I have heard people say like, oh, I don't need to get tested as long as my partner gets tested, because if they're
Yeah.
good, I'm good. And I'm just like, no, no, let's all get tested for ourselves. Like let's please do that. But I think that that's how you end up in situations like you were describing, of like, where in the world did this come from? Like, I'm getting tested, or the number of times I've had conversations of like, please clean your nails, wash your hands before you're touching very delicate parts of people's bodies. Like, if you're gonna be putting your mouth on different parts of people's bodies, like, let's keep the oral hygiene in tip top shape, please.
Yes, you're not about to fucking eat me out after Wingstop. Like, no.
Like, no, because who needs that all inside of them? We don't need no lemon pepper, nothing.
I'm
It,
so
we
dead.
don't need that. No, we don't need no lemon pepper, no hot honey, none of that.
But I feel like a lot of people don't know that. Like,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to like men, like they don't really think of like how delicate our like our friend is.
Yeah.
Like you can't just be doing everything and anything. You can't just be putting anything and everything in there.
Yeah, yes, yes. And it's like conversations that are so important and that are just not being had. And so yeah, people don't know. And then we got yeast infections and BV and all other types of stuff going on, and now we feel ashamed, or you feel dirty, you feel disgusting. And it's like, no, it's like your body's just responding to things that it's come in contact with. Now that we have this information, we can make different choices, we can make some adjustments, but we first have to get the information, right? Like, we first have to know, okay, here there's something going on, or here's how my body reacts to certain things. Like, we need people to know that like your vulva and vagina does not need to smell like roses and dandelions and cotton candy. Like,
Yes.
it's not necessary, nor is it helpful.
And it's again what you were just saying, that educational part. There's a lot of like misinformation, especially with TikTok. I feel like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times there's a lot of people that are giving out advice that are not um have the background or the education to do that, and then they give
Mm-hmm.
out misinformation, and it's like, oh wait, you should not be doing that.
Yeah, yeah. And then we got to spend at least that amount of time correcting the misinformation. And of course, the accurate information never goes as viral, never spreads as quickly or as far as the inaccurate information does. But that's why we keep fighting the good fight and doing the work the best we can.
Exactly. I know you. So I know you're a sex educator. So with
Mm-hmm.
that, do you hold workshops for like young girls on how to like properly clean themselves or like hygiene wise when it comes to like menstruation or anything?
It is definitely something that I am open to and would love to do. The trouble that I run into, also living in the South, I'm in North Carolina.
Mhm.
A lot of people, like you were saying, being unapologetically yourself, right? And if people don't like that, those are not your people. Sometimes people go to my website and they're like, oh, like she's doing a lot, or like they see the sex lady and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a lot. So I do mostly work with adults because I think that that's who mostly feels comfortable working with me. And so my hope is that it's like a trickle down effect, and that the adults that I'm working with are impacting their community and the youth in their community. I would love to do more things with young people. I used to teach sex ed to high school students, which is how I got started in this work.
Mhm.
But teaching sex ed in schools, especially in a state like North Carolina, it just was not for me. It just was not for me. But I would love to do that sort of work outside of those spaces. And I do know some folks who do.
Yeah, I think that's super needed. Like I remember growing up, like even my friends, like sometimes I'm like, girl, you don't really smell that well. Like what's going
Mm,
on? Just know that you have to do this, XYZ.
it's so important. And how do you know unless somebody teaches you?
Exactly, because we're not having those conversations at home. And sometimes,
Mm-mm.
like, the parent is not always going to be present because of, like, we don't know what's going on at the household, you know?
Right,
Um,
right.
and sometimes, like, the kids are learning all of this stuff on social media or at school. And it's like, it just baffles me all the time that we don't have inclusive and all this other stuff, sex education in school, because it's
I
needed.
know. It's so needed. It's so necessary. And there's literally research that shows comprehensive sex ed helps kids delay having sex because they're more informed about what all is involved in making a decision to be sexually active. Abstinence only sex ed is not very effective, but again, it's like you will pry this out of my cold dead hands is how some folks feel about it. So we keep doing the work, we keep fighting the good fight, and we hope that a generation or two from now, maybe things look totally different.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I do want to talk a little bit more about just some of the just some of the political realm, because again, you are very experienced in that area, and a lot of your personal experience and personal like life inspires or motivates a lot of the work that you do even professionally. So when you think about like the background that you have in like reproductive rights, like femtech, sex tech, all these sorts of things, what comes to mind thinking about the current kind of political climate for these fields?
It breaks my heart.
Mm,
Honestly, it breaks my heart. I remember whenever I was moving from DC to Florida to Miami, people were
mhm,
like, "Why? Like it's Florida," and
mhm.
like the reproductive justice, like abortions and all this other stuff. I'm like, I understand that, but with my background, like we need advocates and organizers like myself in these states in order to make those actual like change.
Mm,
I
mhm.
was iffy about moving back to Texas because of all of that, but then I was like, girl, you moved to Florida, like the fuck.
They're cousins.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like with Texas is a little bit more strict or more conservative than it comes
Mhm,
to like Miami and all of that.
mhm.
But I think it's just shifting my perspective. Like, okay, we might not have the resources or the education or the people that are doing this work, but I am doing this work. So how
Yeah.
can I make an impact um, slowly in my community to bring resources and education about reproductive justice, sexual health, sexual pleasure?
Yeah, yeah. What do you find, like when you say it breaks your heart, what challenges do you see like women of color in particular facing when it comes to reproductive health or sexual health that makes it so heartbreaking for you thinking about like the current political climate?
Um, it's the fact that I know here in Texas, I feel like there was a lot of OBGYNs that were leaving Texas. And
Mm.
even at that, like where I grew up, the closest OBGYN growing up was probably like 30 minutes away. The closest Planned Parenthood was probably like 25 minutes. It was like in downtown San Antonio.
Mm.
And it's like resources are already scarce as it is in these areas. And
Yeah.
now with the current political climate, it's like, fuck, like what's going to happen? Because
Yeah.
growing up, like whenever I was having sex, I was super like to like make myself at ease. I'm like, okay, I need to go get tested in like a month or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
it was so hard to access these types of resources because one, it was so far and I didn't have a car. And two, my mom, I was not gonna ask my mom to take me to Planned Parenthood. And
Mm-hmm.
three, um, not having insurance.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was on what's it called, the Texas Healthy Women's Program. I don't
Oh,
even
okay.
know if they have that, but it was for women that are in like low income areas or low income tax bracket to
Mm.
get access to those types of resources. But not everywhere accepts that type of insurance.
Right.
So even
Yeah.
it's just the accessibility is already hard. So I feel like it's gonna be even worse now.
Yeah, if time limits for like accessing abortion get even stricter, and it's like by the time someone knows that they're pregnant or has the money, has like, okay, I found a ride, I can pay for the abortion, is it now too late? Like just thinking about, like you were saying, access already being so challenging and how legislation can make it even more inaccessible.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like with what recently happened too. I think it was like a month or two ago with that teenager that she needed to have like an emergency
Yes.
and they didn't give it to her and she ended up dying.
And
It's
she
like
died. Yeah.
shit like
Yeah.
that. It pisses me off and it breaks my heart because again, I see people that look like me that that's it's happening too.
Yeah, and may not even make national news.
Hmm.
It's just going to be another Tuesday.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, it is. I agree. I too find it very heartbreaking. And even a little anxiety inducing thinking about like what this incoming administration is going to be like and how it's going to impact sexual health and reproductive health. And just speaking of that, like, or speaking of like this recent election season, of course they publish all of these maps and charts and graphs and say here's how folks voted and those sorts of things. And there has been a lot of conversation about how Latino voters overall voted, and being given Latino voters a lot of credit for this incoming administration. And I've seen some conversations of like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Like this man has policy ideas and plans that are going to directly harm this group of people. Why would they vote for him so strongly or come out in such large numbers to vote for him? Do you have a opinion or perspective on how we got here, how this occurred? Obviously, not asking you to speak for your entire community because who could ever do that? But what are your thoughts?
For me, what I'm seeing and what I've heard, I feel like a lot of times, like I know growing up, so my dad growing up, I would say I was Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
No, like you don't say that you're Mexican. You say that you're American. And I never really understood it until I
Mm-hmm.
got older. I'm like, okay, growing up in the South, especially in South Texas, like there is those laws. Like if you speak Spanish, you get hit at school or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like for me, I think that was his way of protecting me.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if you say you're Mexican, people already,
They
and
have
I'm
opinions and judgments
yeah,
and
and
stereotypes.
like, Dad, do you not look at me like?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it goes back into like trying to assimilate and trying to be American as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and another thing I would say is just like the lack of voter education. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people don't understand the electoral process. And honestly, I didn't understand it either until I got into this work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I keep hearing people voted for Trump because of the economy. And I'm like, y'all do realize, like, right now, this is not Biden's economy. Like, we're living in Trump's economy whenever he was previously president.
Mm-hmm.
Or if Trump was president back in like 2020 or whatever, we were living in Obama's economy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, again, it's just a lot of misinformation, miseducation. Um, and it's hurtful too, especially when you see it's mostly the Latino men that voted for Trump. And it's like, damn, like you don't look at the women in your family and be like, I gotta protect them.
Yeah.
All you care about the economy, but you're not even making like 50K. Like you're not even in the tax bracket that Trump is trying to help. First, like let's get that straight first. And it's like, I think it's just ignorance. And I feel like a lot of times now, and not just speaking for the Latino community, I feel like a lot of people who did vote for Trump were thinking mostly about the economy. But whenever, like, I know when I go vote, I'm not thinking about myself only.
Right.
I'm thinking about my community. I'm thinking about my mom, my dad. I'm thinking about my future kids, my nieces and my nephews.
Yeah.
And like for me, like I'm so scared for my nephews because they're so young, and I'm like, dude, shit's about to get rocked.
Yeah.
We don't know what's gonna happen.
We don't even know how. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my opinion about it. I went off the day after because I was like, how the fuck? But
how did we get here? But it makes so much sense, like you said, like it's part of this wanting to assimilate, wanting to be seen as American, chasing the American dream. And I get how you can think you're voting for an opportunity to achieve that American dream. Like you're thinking like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about the economy and he's going to do this and that for this group of people and this group of people. And maybe I'm not there yet, but I want to be, and I'm trying to be. And so I want these policies in effect when I make it there to help me, not realizing that he has policies that are their whole goal is to keep you from getting to the group of people that he's trying to help. Like he has no desire for you to ever make it into that group of people.
Exactly. And it's so crazy to me. I saw this one TikTok video. I think they were doing like a Trump rally down south side, I think by the border. It was this lady who was Mexican. She was older. And they asked her, like, why are you voting for Trump? They were like, didn't you just cross like here like illegal or as an undocumented person? She was like, yes, and I have family that crossed over as well and all this other stuff, but that's not the right way. And everybody's like, but you did the same thing.
But
like
you did it. Yeah.
It goes back to like chasing that American dream and trying to be as American as possible.
And it's so heartbreaking that being as American as possible and the American dream includes so much oppression, even so much internalized or self-imposed oppression, that I have to vote against not only my interests, but the interests of people that I love in order to have a chance here. And what's supposed to be the land of opportunity.
Exactly. Honestly, I don't get it. Like, I don't get it.
It doesn't make sense, but it's like, here we are.
Yeah, when people ask me, I'm like, look, I don't get it. Like, I can't tell you anything.
Yeah. And so as someone who is like, this is my community. I look like them. They look like me. They look like people I love. Like we have so many shared values, and I love my community. You love everything that comes along with being a part of your community, and you're in this world of politics where you do know more, and you do have more information that others may not have. And so you can see like these people I love are possibly making choices that are going to hurt them. How do you navigate that delicate balance of that cultural pride and challenging like the harmful beliefs, thoughts, messages out there?
I think for me, it's just calling out the bullshit. And it's like, bro, like, come on now. And just educating them.
Yeah.
And for my own like peace of mind and my sanity and my mental health, I always say, look, you could talk to people, educate people about whatever it is, but at the end of the day, they're gonna do what they want to do, and you can't force anybody to do or see your perspective, and that's that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'm okay with that. I know as long as I'm doing my part and trying to educate others, being an advocate, being an organizer, and and just advancing that voter education. I know I did my part, but I know I can't force anybody to see my perspective. And I don't know if you've seen on TikTok, everybody's like, oh, how can you unfriend somebody for their political view? Delete and block.
It's actually very easy.
Yes,
It's just a couple of clicks. Yeah.
Yeah, and with this election, I unfriended on like social media a lot of people that I went to high school with. Because it's like what? Like,
yeah.
It's just, again, like, I have no words, and it just doesn't make sense to me. And just to reiterate what I said, it's just all about the voter education, trying to inform others as much as you can. But at the end of the day, you can't force anybody to do anything.
And that is actually going to be the next thing that I said, is that at some point you do have to recognize that here, these are their feelings, these are their experiences, these are their perspectives, this is what they want. And part of the American dream is you get to vote however you want, and according to whatever beliefs or values that you have. And so you can give folks all the information in the world, and they can still decide this is what I want to do, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah, we can only do so much. We can only do what we can do. Yeah. It doesn't make it easy to be a part of those conversations or to experience those moments, but yeah, what can we do? I definitely wanted to end on a high note, and maybe kind of get back to your roots a little bit, in the sense of, like, yeah, being in that toy store in Brooklyn and having that conversation and making those recommendations. I want to talk about sex toys a little bit.
Okay, perfect. I love it.
Yes. So, from your perspective first, why do you think it's so important to have conversations about sex toys and to just normalize these conversational topics, especially in the communities that you're a part of or that you're working with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about inclusive and comprehensive sex education. My opinion about that, like teaching, or just having the conversations with young girls about masturbating or using sex toys, is that in my opinion, I feel like we could prevent a lot of teen pregnancies with that. And having that conversation, like, you don't have to have a man in order to experience pleasure. Pleasure at that. And with me, again, sex toys is so important because it's not taking away from anything. Like, you could use your hands or whatever you like, but with sex toys, it's to enhance. Like, you could reach a whole nother level that you never knew.
It's only an enhancement. It's not, it doesn't take away from anything else. I love that. So for folks who are like, I'm curious about sex toys, I'm curious about pleasure in general, I don't know where to start, like, how do I even, like, dip my toe in this world of sex positivity, maybe especially as it relates to toys, where do you recommend they start?
For me, it's just Google, honestly. I would, even TikTok now, YouTube, just I know with my own YouTube channel, I do sex toy reviews. Yes, so I do.
So your YouTube channel would be a great place for folks to start.
Yeah, my YouTube channel, 100%. I'm just getting started with that, but I do have a video out there where I bought sex toys from Dame Products and also Amazon. And I tried to go the more affordable route, because who can afford like a $200 sex toy right now? Because that's beyond crazy. So yes, I would say my YouTube channel, Google, TikTok. And if you're looking for like the more affordable route, I know whenever I first started, Amazon was my first, like, that's where I got my first sex toy. It was a rose. And honestly, that's the one I will always recommend, especially like if you are starting off, if you're just a beginner. And also, like, Target sells some, Walmart, HEB if you're in Texas. So just looking it up and trying to do your own research with that.
Yeah, okay. I love it. Are there any last thoughts, last words of wisdom, anything you want to share with our listeners? It's like, if they don't take anything else away from this conversation, you hope they at least walk away with what?
I would say be unapologetically yourself all the time. the people that are meant to be in your life will be in your life. Set those boundaries, take care of your mental health first, take care of yourself first, and explore. Like, go live in another city, go to a different college that's not in your hometown or your home state. Just try to explore as much as possible and get out of your comfort zone.
I love it. I love it. Lorena, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm like, there's so much more we could have talked about. And whenever I feel that way about a guest, I'm like, it just means you got to come back. It just means we have to have more conversations. Can you tell folks where to find you, where to find your YouTube, how to find you on social media, how to get connected to the PFILES?
Yes. So the PFILES, if you go to my social media, there's a link to it because it's through Beehive. So my Instagram is at Love Me Lorena. So Love Me, LOVEME, Lorena, LORENA. And then that's the same for my YouTube channel at Love Me Lorena. And then my TikTok is Lorena_the PFILES.
Love it.
So again, my newsletter is all linked on my socials and also my YouTube channel. So go ahead and go find me on Instagram, TikTok, whatever it may be.
Perfect. And we will put those names and links in the show notes to make it a little easier for folks. Lorena, again, thank you so much for just showing up unapologetically you to have this incredible conversation. I won't say bye. This is more like a see you later or until next time, because I do think that there's plenty more for us to talk about. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Make sure to connect with Lorena on social media. Subscribe to the PFILES. There is so much incredible work happening, and Lorena is a great introduction to it all. So thank you so much again for just taking the time to be here and joining us on From the Heartside Out.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this, and I look forward to coming back and talking to you more.
Great. Thank you for tuning in to From the Heartside Out, hosted by See the Sex Lady, produced by Christine Johnson of Pure Pod Vibes, and music by Rico the Artist. If you enjoyed this episode or learned something new, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review on your platform of choice. And don't forget to share with a friend so they can learn something too. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Please send any comments or questions to podcast@seethesexlady.com. That's podcast@seethesexlady.com. Until next time, keep loving, living, and leading from the Heartside Out.